Welcome to Aging with Dignity. I'm your host, Varsha. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month in Canada. And instead of ending it with another interview, I wanted to sit with you for a few minutes, just you and me, and reflect on what this month has meant, not just for the podcast, but for all of us who are walking some version of this road. Because Alzheimer's and dementia aren't abstract ideas. They live in our homes, they show up in our relationships, they change how we love, how we communicate, and how we imagine the future. And if you're listening today because this is part of your life, because someone you love is living with dementia, I want you to hear this first. You are not alone. You're part of a community that understands what this feels like. And here on Aging with Dignity, that's exactly the kind of community we're trying to build, one rooted in compassion, honesty, and shared experience. This month, we explored dementia from many angles. But before I talk about the guests, I want to come back to where this journey began for me, with my mother. Recently, our family story was carried in the Suburban, and in that article, I talked about something many people have never heard of: corticobasal degeneration, a rare and particularly cruel form of dementia. It presents as Alzheimer's and it presents as Parkinson's. So we have the loss of memory and loss of motor skills together. When people hear the word dementia, they often think about memory loss, forgetting names, forgetting dates, forgetting where you put your keys. But that wasn't how it started for my mom. For her, it began in her body, in the way she moved, in the way her hand no longer did what her brain was asking it to do, in the way speech slowly became harder and then almost impossible. CBD affects both the brain and the body, and it blurs that line between what is physical and what is cognitive. And that made it incredibly difficult to explain to people what was really happening. People would say, "But she still knows who you are." And yes, sometimes she did. But knowing didn't mean she could express it. And loving didn't mean she could show it in the way she once did. One of the hardest things about dementia, especially rare forms like this, is that the person is still there, but you lose the way you used to reach them. And that can feel incredibly lonely. It was certainly incredibly difficult to try and guess what mom wanted and to try and honor her wishes. In the article, I spoke about how isolating this can be, not just for the person living with dementia, but for the family around them. Slowly, your world gets smaller. Friends don't always know what to say. Invitations stop coming. Conversations become awkward. And suddenly, you're carrying something very heavy, very quietly. That experience, that shrinking world, is what planted the seed for Aging with Dignity. I didn't want families to feel as alone as we did. I wanted a space for real conversations, not just medical ones. Conversations about care and grief and fear and love and what it means to keep seeing the person even when the disease is trying to erase them. And that's what this month has really been about. We began with Ron Beleno, a caregiver advocate who spoke so openly about the emotional reality of caregiving. Not just the logistics, not just the appointments and medications, but the inner life of a caregiver. The guilt when you feel impatient, the guilt when you need rest, the guilt when you wonder if you're doing enough. And what Ron reminded us is that caregiving isn't a failure of love. It's love expressed under pressure day after day. Then we heard from Anouk Coxon and Jean Day from the Montreal Alzheimer's Society, who helped ground us on what real support looks like on the ground: education, navigation, and connection. Their work is a reminder that dementia doesn't come with a manual, and families shouldn't have to figure this out in isolation. When people know where to turn, fears soften, and when they feel supported, the load becomes lighter. We also had the chance to speak with Dr. Saskia Sivananthan from the Brainwell Institute. She helped us to look at dementia through a wider lens, not just as a disease of decline, but as something shaped by mental health, environment, and social connection. Her perspective reminds us that when we reduce dementia to forgetfulness, we really risk missing the human being who's still very much there. And then we step beyond medicine into something just as important: community. With Cynthia Lapointe from Compassionate Communities Movement at the Teresa Deller Palliative Care Residence, we talked about what happens when care doesn't stop at the hospital door. What happens when neighbors, friends, and everyday people become part of the circle of care? Because dementia doesn't need just professionals, it needs people. All of these conversations point to the same truth. Dementia is not only a medical issue, it's a social one. It challenges how we care, how we stay connected, and how we show up for one another when someone is changing right before our eyes. And that brings me back to my mom. CBD took her independence. It took her voice. It took away her ability to do things for herself. But what stayed with me and still stays with me is this: she was still there, still feeling, still deserving of tenderness. Dementia teaches us something deeply uncomfortable, that dignity has nothing to do with productivity or independence. It has everything to do with how we treat someone when they can no longer advocate for themselves. And that's why Alzheimer's Awareness Month matters, not just for research or funding, but for culture. We need to change how we talk about aging. We need to change how we talk about cognitive decline. We need to stop whispering about it as though it's something shameful. Because science is what makes families feel alone. And isolation is what breaks people long before the disease does. So today, as we look at January through a rearview lens, I want to open this space wider to you and to everyone walking this path. Whether you're living with dementia, caring for someone with dementia, or grieving someone you've lost to it, you're part of a compassionate community. You are not walking this road by yourself. And here on Aging with Dignity, you don't have to pretend it's easy or tidy or simple. And we're not done with this conversation. In the weeks ahead, we'll continue talking about brain health and aging with Dr. Julia Chabot, president of the Geriatrics Quebec, and with Dr. Antonella Santuccioni Chada from the Women's Brain Foundation, who will help us understand how women's brain health has been overlooked and why that matters for conditions like Alzheimer's. I also want to let you know that in a couple of weeks, I'll be doing a special solo episode that I think many of you will want to hear. Over the past little while, I've been receiving your questions, real caregiver questions about what to do when you're overwhelmed, how to make decisions, how to talk to family, how to cope with the emotional weight of this role. I'm gathering those questions and dedicating an episode to them because caregivers deserve answers and they deserve to feel seen. And no matter our role, we can all learn and grow and better understand the challenges and strains facing caregivers around us. That'll be one not to miss. So, as Alzheimer's Month comes to an end, I don't see this as a conclusion. I see it as a continuation. Awareness doesn't stop in January. It continues in our homes, in our clinics, in our neighborhoods, and in the way we speak about memory, loss, and love. A gentle reminder to please share this podcast series with your family, your friends, or anyone you care about. And please don't forget to hit like and subscribe to this podcast if you're enjoying what you hear. Thank you for walking this month with me. Thank you to every guest who has trusted this space with their voice. And thank you always for listening. Until next time, reminding us all to age gracefully and live vibrantly. Everything you've heard today, just real talk. It's just our personal stories, experiences, and honest opinions. This podcast isn't providing legal, medical, financial, or therapeutic advice. And no, listening doesn't make me or my guests your lawyer, doctor, financial advisor, or therapist. The guests and I are here to share stories, spark ideas, and hopefully give you something to think about. When it comes to the big decisions, make sure you do your homework or check in with the experts who know your situation best. We're here to keep the conversation going. You're the one in the driver's seat.